Welcome to the Faith to You podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rogers, and I'm here once again with Pastor Caleb. And we're beginning to start a new session or a new series of videos we're going to be talking about. And we're looking at kind of, you've been teaching in church on what does it look like to be an elder? What is an elder? What are the qualifications for one? What disqualifies one? What qualifies one? And so we're going to take kind of more of a deeper dive into what it looks like to be an elder and what you look for in an elder. And we kind of want to supplement what you've been teaching. Obviously, I'm sure you'd like to go for like 3 hours every single Sunday, and you don't have time. So we're going to kind of supplement some deep dive, a lot of kind of the practical application. Okay, we've talked about it in church. What does that look like? What does that look like in your life as an elder? What does that look like, and what should that look like in any man in the church that wants to become one? And so that's kind of our starting point, the questions we're going to ask. And so let's just start there. When you're looking at the church and you're looking to get a new elder, what are the qualifications? What are the qualities you want to see in a man that leads to an elder?
One of the things we notice in both of the quality lists that we have in 1 Timothy and in Titus, there's some there's a crossover to them. But one of the things that you need to identify is that these lists are written to a specific people at a specific time. And so these lists are, they're I think, narrower than what we're actually going to look for. Really, if I'm going to paint with broad strokes, what we're looking for is a man who's really already in a lot of ways fulfilling the office of an elder. So I'm looking for somebody who people are following. I'm looking for somebody who's been an effective disciple maker. They've discipled several others. Those people, there's actually fruit in their disciples' life, right? So they've discipled men who are then discipling other men. They've discipled their children, and they can see spiritual maturity in their children. They've discipled their wife, and we can see spiritual maturity in their wife. So really, the very first thing I do when I look at an elder is I look behind him. And I look at who are the people that he's training, and that's the primary thing. We're going to see those qualities in him, but are those qualities he's passing on? And that shows us this is a shepherd. This is a shepherd in our church.
Okay, excellent. So why, after you've talked about that, why did you then aspire to become an elder? And ultimately that led to you being the senior pastor, but why did you start pushing that way?
The primary motivator for me was just a deep love for the people of Faith Community. I'd been serving here my whole life, really. You grew up at Faith. You grew up serving at Faith. Actually, as soon as Pastor Madison came over, he started putting me in different places to serve. And then all through my teenage years, I was teaching, I was leading Bible studies, and I've always had a passion for discipling younger people, discipling my peers, and so I realized that I had the skills, I had the accoutrements of an elder, but for me it wasn't just like, okay, I could do this. The should came from my love for the people. Like, God gave me this sense of, these are the people that I've given you responsibility for. And that really was, in my life, that was because of the love that I had for the people at Faith Community. And that came sort of through, like, working through, like, should I be going somewhere else? Should I be going into foreign missions? And God really impressing on my own heart, no, these are the people I want you to serve. These are the people I want you to shepherd and minister to. And so I started pursuing that really because of a love of the body.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. That's really cool. So then what makes being an elder so noble or such a good office to seek?
So I think that I have to remind myself frequently that it's noble work. And in the passage, I think it's saying that because Paul wants the church at Ephesus to understand, like, this is a good thing. This is a good work. This is noble. What these men are aspiring to. They're not aspiring to something that should be seen as demeaning work. It's not something that should be seen as work that should be beneath anybody. Like, this is a good aspiration. And so that's what Paul's explaining there in 3:1. But really the nobility of it isn't measured by earthly accolades. So it's not like, oh, this is a noble work. You become an elder. everybody's going to love you. Everybody's going to think you're awesome. Oftentimes it's the opposite. Like when you're in leadership, you really open yourself up for a heightened sense of scrutiny. You have to a lot of times absorb offenses because that's what it means to be a leader. So it's hard. So that noble work really is measured in eternal terms more than temporary pleasures or experiences. So it's really like this is something that's going to give you an opportunity to have more treasure in heaven. It's going to give you an opportunity to suffer more. It's going to give you an opportunity to go through trials more. And so the nobility of it isn't really measured by anything that's going to be necessarily experienced in this life. But it's worth it because we're pressing on. We're pressing towards an eternal goal. So the nobility is really measured more by eternal fruit and eternal treasures than by any temporary experiences.
So you're not being an elder to get rich. You're being an elder because you can be a greater servant of God and just pour more and more and more and go deeper into kind of his calling.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus says that like among those born among women, there's not one greater than John. Yeah. And John's attitude, John the Baptist, is I must decrease, he must increase. And that has to be the attitude of an elder. So if an elder is like, oh, I want to aspire to this heightened office, right? Like that I'm going to increase. Yeah. Christ doesn't increase if we increase. No. Christ increases as we decrease. And so as you go to that, you have to recognize I'm decreasing. This is
I step into leadership so that I can serve.
Exactly.
So that I can pour into and raise others up, ultimately raising Christ up. That's cool. So that's kind of the greatness of the office of the elder and how it's noble and good to seek. Let's get into some of the practical, some of the qualifications. Yeah. Like it talks about the one-woman man. Yeah. He has to be a one-woman man. What does that mean? What does that look like, and what does that look like for you? How do you work that out in your life?
Yeah. So for me, being a one-woman man isn't just, I'm only married to my wife, or I'm not flirtatious. I'm not going around and flirting with other women. It's more than that. Like those are like obviously over attributes that you're going to look for an elder. But for me, in my practice of being a one-woman man, means not only that I'm married to Leah, but I'm pursuing her. And so that means that I need to have not given up on wooing my wife. I need to be a woman romantic man. And so it's like I tell my wife that she's my one and only, but then I show my wife that she's my one and only by my affection towards her. So really being a one-woman man means I'm just continuing to pursue my wife. If I'm not effective in my ministry to my wife as a husband, I fail in my office. Like I'm disqualified from my office.
That's the number one ministry you're called to, then children, then church.
Like 1 Peter 3:7 is scary for husbands. Like you fail at this, you're not dwelling with your wife in an understanding manner as with a weaker vessel, giving honor to her, your prayers are hindered. Like my whole spiritual life is hinged on how effective I am at loving my wife as Christ loved the church. And the greatest sermon that I'm going to preach is going to be the way that I lay my life down for my wife. And so sacrificially loving my wife is central to my calling as a pastor. And it has to be at the forefront of my mind. It has to be at the forefront of my practice. It's so easy in ministry to let the ones that you love the most suffer the most. Because you know that you love them and you know that they love you. Yeah. And so because you're secure in that relationship, at times you'll begin to neglect them. And so for me, I've built in habits and rhythms into my life. I call it a built-in no. And so I have times in my calendar that this is my time for my wife, and I will say no to everybody. Anybody says, hey, Pastor, can I meet with you during this time? No, that's when I'm with my wife. People want 24/7 access to the pastor. And I have built-in no's. People will call me sometimes and I won't call back because I'm with my wife or I'm with my family and I'm trying to be present with them. So building those things into my rhythm are so important to me being effective as a pastor. I need to have that built-in know. The other thing that I do, I practice just making sure that I'm above reproach when it comes to my relationship with any other women. And so my wife has the ability to say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with that woman. Be careful of her, avoid her. And I'll listen to her, right? If she's uncomfortable with me interacting with a woman, you know, I'm gonna be sensitive to whatever restrictions she wants to place on me. She has full access to all of my socials, you know, so my email, my cell phone, all my text messages, any social media, she can go through that. She can vet who I'm friends with or who I'm not friends with. And then also, I make sure I'm never in any sort of compromising situation with any woman. So anything that could appear evil. So I'll never be in my office with the door closed with a woman who's not my wife or one of my children, or my mother, you know, a family member like that. But outside of those relationships, I'm not going to ever have a woman in my office by themselves. I'm not going to be alone in any situation with a woman. So just avoiding anything, you know, trying to be above reproach. If I meet with a woman for counseling, I'll either have a woman in here with me while I'm meeting with them for counseling, or I'll leave the door open while I meet with them, just to be above reproach. So there's a lot that goes into being a one-woman man, but I try to maintain all of those practices, and then I try to communicate them to my staff so they can hold me accountable to that. Hey, pastor, like, this is your standard. Make sure you're doing this, you know? And if I'm not, then they know they can call me on that.
That's good. So to kind of sum up what you said first, if you can't love the most important person in your life, how can you love the sheep of the church?
Exactly.
And so part of the one-woman man is not just like, oh, purity, but it's also love.
Yeah.
And if I can love her, then that shows that I can love others. And if I can't, how can I love anyone else? Yeah. And then secondly, it is that being above reproach, so no one can bring an accusation against you. Okay. So the one of the next things is discipline. What is discipline? How that works? So how does discipline factor into being an elder? And what does that look like, that self-control discipline in your life?
Yeah, either I'm controlled by the Spirit or I'm controlled by my flesh. And so, you know, I preached on this, but what's important for me in my own life is that I'm maintaining healthy spiritual habits, and I'm maintaining healthy physical habits. So for spiritual habits, I make rules for myself. I set goals for myself. So one of my daily rules is no phone until Bible. So I read through the Bible every year, at least once in a year, and that's just for myself. That's outside of like preaching or any classes that I'm teaching. I'm reading through the Bible, and so I make sure that I do my daily Bible reading before I do anything social on my phone or anything entertaining, right? So I make sure that I do that first. And I started doing that because I had a habit of like checking my like social media in the morning, and I was like, and I wasn't getting my Bible reading done. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so I made that rule for myself, and it became so much easier to make sure I read through the Bible every single year. The other thing I do is I start every single morning with prayer. And that prayer is with my wife. So the two of us, we begin every single morning praying aloud together. So that's a habit. That's a spiritual discipline, but it's also a self-discipline that we have in our life. I try to finish every day I pray with every single one of my children. Well, my wife prays with our daughters, and I pray with my sons every single night before we go to bed. We pray aloud. And then as I'm drifting off to sleep, I try to actually fall asleep in a spirit of prayer. So these are spiritual disciplines that I'm seeking to maintain. But something I find is those are hard to maintain if I'm not being good with my discipline with just my body. So my sleep habits. I try to be consistently getting 7 hours or more of sleep a night. So I love to get 8 hours, but that's really hard to get 8 hours. So I shoot for 7 hours of sleep a night. I try to exercise 5 to 6 days a week. For me, exercise is running, so I try to go out and go for a run. I'm disciplined with my diet. The food that you eat affects the way that you feel. It affects how well you're going to even just be able to study the Word. For me to be present, I need to make sure that the things that I'm putting in my body are fuel. And so those physical disciplines help in the spiritual disciplines. So that self-control, that self-discipline, it covers every area of my lifestyle.
Okay, so discipline, part of it, well, I mean, we're spirit and body, so part of it is if you can physically discipline yourself, that's going to influence your ministry, but then also the spiritual discipline of like prayer and Bible reading and stuff, that's a key factor of your life as well, to both influence what you do when no one's watching or few people are watching, affects then how you do when everyone's watching.
Exactly.
That kind of thing of integrity. Okay, we didn't get through the whole list, and we'll probably have to do another session here in a second. But that's kind of start to open up. This is what it looks like to be an elder, and this is kind of the rules you've set in place in your own life to fulfill those qualities, so you yourself will not be disqualified. And I gotta say, at least from my side, I'm encouraged by the lifestyle you've set before us. Encouraged to walk in the Lord, follow you as you follow Christ,
awesome.
as they say. So thank you guys for watching again, and we'll see you later. God bless.
Awesome.